Hello, bruvs. We're back with the Memoirs of Bridget Hitler, edited by Michael Unger, illustrated Duckworth edition from 1979, and we are on Chapter 6. Section 6, Chapter 6, whatever you want to call it. I believe it was the very day Pat arrived from Germany that we first attempted to retract our earlier statements and make it clear that we had no connection with the family of the German Chancellor. When I was alone, I took down an enlarged and tinted photograph of Eloise in my son's room and burnt it in our tiny fireplace. I felt as though a weight was lifted from my heart. It was almost like a ceremony. I thought I had obliterated every tangible thing that connected me with that disreputable family. I was burning my past. There was a brief statement in the morning paper, but it didn't help. No one who hasn't gone through it can understand what innumerable annoyances and unlimited hours of bitterness those endlessly repeated newspaper articles caused us. Those who heard of the denial justly questioned, why did he say something a few weeks ago that you are constrained to deny today? Then there was another, a psychological consequence of our about face. When the first stories connecting us with Adolf Hitler appeared, many people doubted them on the grounds that whenever a new public figure gains prominence, there are always people who come forward and claim kinship with him. At that time, they doubted the statement that we were related to Hitler. Now, the very people who doubted the assertion found something suspicious in our refutation, even though we tried to make it plain that our first statements had been based on a misunderstanding. As a result of our denials, far from sinking into obscurity, we shifted even more into the limelight. I blame myself for this. Pat and I were both working for the same engineering company in Wigmore Street. One day, Mr. Caligari, the secretary, came to me and informed me that they were reducing the staff of my department. I was dismayed, but since I'd been the last to come, I suppose I must be the first to go. But it struck me as odd that they paid me a week's salary in lieu of notice, and then the secretary added, and I would advise your son to look for a new position also. Why, what has he done? I asked, surprised. Well, after you leave here, his life won't be worth living. My son and I smiled wryly at the similarity of our experiences and didn't take the coincidence too seriously, thinking we'd both find new positions, but Mr. Caligari's heartless words almost proved true. We were disappointed, and bitterly at that. Days and weeks passed. Like most working people, we had laid aside something for a rainy day, and of course we got the unemployment dole. But now our savings were being swiftly consumed. Wherever my son applied, his handsome appearance and agreeable manners won him immediate attention, but as soon as his prospective employer noticed the name on his reference, he would look perturbed and say, almost invariably, oh, by the way, are you related to that German chap? No, I'm not related to him, my son would reply. I thought I read something about it in the papers. Well, I'm sorry, we haven't got anything that would suit you at the present time, but we'll keep your name before us. Week after week, coming home after a day spent in fruitless searching, we compared notes. Our daily adventures ran parallel. I had tried giving my maiden name, and once I succeeded in obtaining a position, but as soon as one of the papers I had to show disclosed my identity, I was given notice. Our quest became more and more hopeless. At first, we had supposed that after a few months people would forget us and we could sink into the quiet and unsensational obscurity of the average humdrum London existence, but ours was a special case, and the prediction of my husband that Hitler would reach the top became reality. On 30th January, Adolf became Chancellor of Germany. Now, whenever the dictator crossed the Rubicon and Germany had a bad dream, or caused someone else to have one, unfortunately, things of the worst kind happened almost every week. The eyes of the world turned towards Germany, and the English victims of these recurring sensations were none other than ourselves. In our minds, a new idea was beginning to take shape. We would go to America. Why should we not follow the example of those millions who left their homes to try their luck in the new world? The more we thought about it, the more hopeful we became. We would dispose of all of our possessions in England and take passage for a new life. What do you got, bruv? The end of May, we arrived home to find a heavy yellow envelope, postmarked Vienna. I hastily opened it. As I unfolded the sheets of paper, we saw that they were birth certificates, death certificates, and other family records. Pat had gone for advice to a friend of his, Dr. Brown, who was connected with the London Auto Club. With the kindest of intentions, but without consulting us, Dr. Brown had approached the legal department of the Vienna British Embassy and requested them to secure for me the birth certificates of Adolf, Alois, and their fathers. Dr. Brown thought these would enable us to prove Pat was not related to the Hitler family, and thus the hindrance to unemployment would be removed. Of course, as I could have told Dr. Brown, the documents from Vienna proved the opposite. Look here, Mother, Pat exclaimed, holding out two of the documents. There's Adolf's birth certificate, and this one is my father's. Both of them have the same father, Alois Hitler, customs employee. So they lied to me when they said they had different fathers. It was a plot by Angela, Adolf, and my own father. What do you make of it? And then Pat looked at me as though my face had suddenly become that of a stranger. Oh, I see. You knew all the time? You deceived me too? Don't be silly, Pat. I told him. Naturally, I knew, but I thought it would be better that way. Uncle Adolf as Chancellor, 30 January 1933. What do you got, bruv? Pat's face blazed with anger. Oh, are you now? Pat's face blazed with anger. He flung the documents on the table and slammed out of the house. I think it was the only time in his life that he lost his temper with me. It was several hours before he came back. The moment I saw his face, I knew he was himself again. Almost before he was through the door, he was saying, I wrote to Adolf, Mother, and I told him what I thought of him. To Adolf? Yes, Mother, to Uncle Adolf, and I don't think he'll deposit my letter in the Berlin State Archives. I told him I had documents which proved beyond the slightest possibility of contradiction that he and my father had the same father, and that I know now that he lied when he said I wasn't his nephew. And I told him how unfair I thought he'd been to place me in such an awkward position. He stopped for a moment, thinking hard, then he went on. I wrote another letter, too, to Father. I don't know whether he'll approve of it or not. I think a son should respect his father, no matter what he may have done, but a father has some duty towards his son, too. And when I saw these papers, I couldn't restrain myself from what a disillusionment it had been to me. When I found out he had Aunt Angela send the telegram saying that he was dying, I said I just couldn't understand him, and to learn that he had plotted against me with Uncle Adolf and Aunt Angela was too much. I told him it had been his duty to tell me the truth. He might have trusted me enough to tell me why I was being put into this unpleasant position. Perhaps Adolf had some good reasons for not wanting to have Irish relatives. My own father might at least have confided in me. He had no reason to deceive me. At the end of my letter, I told him you and I have decided to go to America. And mother, he added, I mailed them right away so you'd have no time to object. Pat paused again and then laughed gaily, as he does when he's pleased with himself. And as he spoke, I felt proud I had a son who could leave disappointment behind and turn with debonair spirit towards the future. What do you got, bruv? A few days later, Pat received a letter from his father asking him to come to Germany for a family meeting. Adolf was going to settle things. Pat decided not to reply. Instead, we accelerated our plans to make a clean break. Unfortunately, however, no matter how we cudgeled our brains to make our resources stretch, there was barely enough money to pay our initial expenses and none at all to carry us over the period we might have to wait before making desirable connections. It was at this point that Eloise telegraphed me from Berlin. Don't make the mistake of going to America. Stop. Your America is here in Germany. Stop. Come here immediately, and I guarantee in 24 hours after you arrive, stop. I will have positions for you. Stop. Go to the German embassy in London. Stop. They will provide you with funds for the trip. Stop. Bring Willie with you. Stop. We read and reread the telegram, trying to decipher its meaning, hoping to find between the lines an answer to our question. We discussed and debated its contents until late in the night. Pat felt he should go, but I protested vehemently. It wasn't that I didn't think he could get a job in Germany. We both had complete confidence in that part of the plan. No, I couldn't easily divine the cause of the uneasiness that ceaselessly welled up from the bottom of my mind. I just felt I shouldn't let him go. As for the suggestion that I go, I didn't even consider it. Pat, seeing an end to the long and hopeless months of unemployment and the prospect of being able to earn enough money to ensure the success of our plan to go to America and start over again, grew so enthusiastic that he merely smiled at all my doubts and objections. Why should you imagine that anything could happen to me in Germany? It isn't as though I was going out there to become a German. I'm still English, and if you're worried that the Nazi germ might get into my system, why, that's just impossible. Those few weeks I spent in Germany made me immune forever to the infection, even if Uncle Adolf himself should try to convert me. We spent the next day in preparation for the journey, and the day after, I accompanied Pat to the railroad station to see him off. Don't worry, Mother, Pat said, trying to reassure me. Even though I hadn't said any more, he knew I was still troubled about his going. I'll only stay until I can save enough money so we can do what we want. It won't be long. I can live on very little. As the train rode irrevocably away, the apprehension I had felt before took a new hold on me, and I couldn't shake it off. I should never have let him go, I repeated to myself over and over again, as I stared after the departing train, the hot tears blurring my eyes. The way home had never seemed so lonesome and gloomy before. Pat was gone. I received a postcard from Strasbourg, where his train stopped for a half hour. It was the only sign of life. A week passed with no word. I watched the papers. It was the commencement of the Nazi terror. Cruelty. Priests arrested. Jews being beaten. Democrats assassinated. It was frightful. How could I have been so senseless as to let Pat go to that terrible country? Now it was too late. I prayed that nothing had happened to him, but how could I be sure? Yeah, I am tired. After a second week had slipped away without my hearing one word from him, in response to the telegrams of inquiry I had sent, I went to the German embassy. What's happened to my son? I demanded of the first official I met. He's a British subject, and unless I receive satisfactory news of him, trying to call me, the man asked, What is your son's name, madam? When I told him, the official looked at me with great surprise. Isn't there some mistake, madam? Is your son's name really Hitler? There's no mistake, I replied emphatically. My son is the nephew of Adolf Hitler. He left for Berlin more than 2 weeks ago, and I haven't heard from him since. But, my dear madam, he smiled, you can't for a moment suppose that anything could happen to the Fuhrer's nephew. Please sit down. We'll call Berlin at once and find out. 15 minutes later, I heard my son's voice over the telephone. I'm all right, mother, he was saying. There's nothing wrong. I don't understand why you haven't heard from me. Then a second voice interposed. It was that of my ex-husband. I recognized it the moment he said the first word. Hello, Brovs. My darling Cece, there's no need to be anxious about Pat. He's right here with me. Why should you be worried? You ought to be ashamed for worrying for no reason at all. I had heard my son's voice, and it was therefore obvious that no harm had come to him, but I left the embassy feeling inexplicably disturbed. For a whole year I hadn't seen my son. Every week a letter or postcard arrived. I learned that he had a job in the Reich Credit Bank in Berlin. As I write these lines, the letters Pat sent me during his stay in Germany are lying before me on the desk. They are brief and cautious. Anyone could tell that he was aware of the fact that every line was being minutely examined by someone. It is amazing how much you can read from what isn't said in a letter. This is the Memoirs of of Bridget Hitler. Every letter commenced and ended with an apology for his not being able to send me any money. German wages were arranged to fall into certain categories, certain living standard categories. Pat's were fixed at a level which enabled him to eat and keep a roof over his head, but that was about all. Yet, in spite of his meager salary, Pat had managed to save up a little money, only to find that the restrictions existing in Germany with regard to sending money out of the country made it impossible for him to send me even the small sum he had eked out for that purpose. And because of his name and family connections, he had more reason than other people to respect the law. During the first year of his absence, in almost every letter, there was some vague reference to the fact that all German workers are entitled to vacation and that he hoped nothing would stand in the way of his spending his vacation with me in London. By this time, I had managed to obtain a suitable position there, but in his later letters, I could read his bitter disappointment between the lines, which told me in a matter-of-fact way that all employees of his company had renounced their right to a vacation next year. Naturally, he couldn't be the exception. With this, my patience was at an end. On the spur of the moment, I wrote to him, telling him to resign his job and come home as soon as possible. I told him conditions had greatly improved in England during his absence and assured him he wouldn't have to roam the streets looking for a job because of his name any longer. One of his objects in going to Germany had been to help me. I no longer needed that help, which hadn't materialized anyway. I had a good place myself now, and it didn't make sense because he couldn't take any money out of the country. I received no reply to this letter. There was no official censorship at this time because Hitler was still affected by international opinion. However, all letters were opened by the currency inspection control, ostensibly to make sure that no money was sent out of the country, contrary to German regulations. Actually, this was a disguised censorship by means of which Hitler controlled correspondence with foreign countries. And unfavorable or inconvenient letters had a way of disappearing. In a later letter to Pat, I mentioned that this letter must have gone astray, and again urged him to come home. In a brief note, Pat replied that he couldn't think of returning home. Apprehension and dismay filled my mind to the exclusion of every other consideration. I read and reread my son's letters, trying to decipher from them what was the true state of affairs. Pat's letters contained nothing but reassurance. I was convinced that he was keeping from me everything that he would normally say. Could it be that he was doing this because of the danger involved in telling me the truth? I decided to write to Eloise, my ex-husband, and demand that he use his influence to help Pat get home. He replied according to his custom in a long, ardent letter, praising our son extravagantly, telling me how happy he was with what excellent company he kept, how inconsiderate of me it was to insist on his giving up a position which promised a great future and had started so proficiently. Then he said, on the other hand, why couldn't you come here, Cece darling? If you are so anxious to see the boy, why not come and visit him? You could come by plane as far as Paris and then to Berlin. It's only a short trip. If you're willing, I'll be pleased to arrange it with the German embassy in London so that they facilitate your journey. Eloise must have felt pretty sure of my reaction, for he didn't even wait for a reply. The following day I received a letter from a Mr. Thorner, an official at the German embassy, requesting me to come and see him. When I presented the letter I had received, Mr. Thorner brought out a file and said, I have received an order from the Chancellery to advance you funds for your traveling expenses and to assist you in every way. When would you like to leave, madam? I replied almost automatically, as soon as possible. The moment the formalities were arranged, I sent Pat a telegram informing him I was coming, and at noon the next day I left London. I had just enough time to catch the train which took me to the Channel. After crossing the Channel in France, I got off at the Bahnhof in Berlin at 9 o'clock the following morning. The moment I left the train, I saw my son rushing to meet me. As he kissed and embraced me, he whispered into my ear, Mother, you have done an insane thing in coming here. You shouldn't have come to Germany. Good Lord, tell me what's happened. My pulse almost stopped as I waited for his answer. He was still holding me in his arms as he said, We can't talk here. Don't say anything until we get to the hotel. Blesses, man. Never heard of you. And that's going to be the end of this reading. Unless someone pays me $33 trillion in pennies. Anybody? I will read tomorrow. And I will read today. And I will read yesterday. Yeah, good night. Guten Abend.